Hi, I'm Kasra Fard, and this is Project Cost Management and the impact of resource productivity on project cost management. Project managers strive to estimate the cost of activities in their projects as accurately as possible. Underestimating or even overestimating the costs of a project could result in a project being delayed, paused, or cancelled. In worst case scenario even, it could have negative impacts on a PM's job or even career. To review, PMs employ one or more of the following techniques to estimate the costs of activities of their projects. They could use past projects as a technique. They could use similar projects approach. They could use parametric prototyping, ballpark, and even the definitive technique. The definition of all these techniques will come in my later videos. Today, I want to focus mostly on how a PM can increase the accuracy of the estimation process. To increase accuracy, a PM would want to focus and consider 4 elements. First, the resources, human and non-human resources, including the productivity and availability of each human resource. Then, timing of cash flows, cash and money and funds coming in and going out of the project's account. Third point to consider is the project characteristics and if there is anything specific or abnormal about the project. And lastly, the PM needs to have a good understanding of different types of costs impacting the project activities, including direct costs, indirect costs, fixed costs, variable costs, hidden costs, and etc. In this article and in this video, I will focus on the productivity of human resources and how that impacts the cost estimates. The definition of all these different types of costs will be covered in my future videos as well. Let's talk about productivity. The cost of an activity is essentially a function of the duration of that particular activity. So if the cost of activity A is shown by C sub A, then C sub A will be a function of the duration of that activity being D sub A. Therefore, to accurately estimate C sub A, the PM will need to have an accurate estimation of the duration that it takes to perform the activity A. While there are a few ways to estimate the duration of activity A, all of these techniques will be based on inputs from subject matter experts or SMEs. SMEs' input will be only useful if the person providing the estimate will be the same person who is performing the task and activity. If the activity is going to be performed by another resource, the provided time estimate will have to be converted to a value that would be acceptable by the actual resource who is going to do the task. Let's explore this concept a bit further. Let's imagine resource A, or subject matter expert A, provides a duration of 10 days for activity A. Assuming that no other resources are required to perform this activity, and there are no hidden costs or indirect costs associated with this activity, and assuming that the cost of our SME, the person who's provided this estimation, is $1,000 per day, the cost of this particular activity will be estimated to be $10,000. $1,000 times 10 days, $10,000. Now, if the PM takes this activity and assigns it to resource B, a different person, to perform this activity, then we will have 3 different situations. Activity A being done by resource B may take less than 10 days if resource B has a higher level of productivity than that of our resource A. And this is very possible. We may hire somebody who is more productive than our subject matter expert. Or, in the second case, it may take more than 10 days if the new person resource B has a lower level of productivity than that of the original SME who provided the time estimate. Or it could be exactly 10 days if both resources have the same level of productivity. So by using this, we will see that there's only one case and one scenario that the PM's estimation will be accurate. There is actually only 1 in 3 chance, or 33% probability, that the time estimate done by the PM is accurate. Now, to improve this level of probability, the PM will need to have a good understanding of the productivity of the second resource. The PM needs to understand resource B very well. So let's say that we have a productivity factor. Let's call it P sub B. So this is the productivity factor of resource B. Let's say that is 60%. If the productivity factor of resource B is 60%, then the duration of activity A done by resource B will no longer be 10 days. It will be actually 10 days divided by 60%, which will be 16.67 days, or 16 days and close to 6 hours. In this case, I just introduced the concept of productivity factor. The productivity factor is a subjective factor that can only be measured relative to the productivity of another resource. Like in this example, the productivity factor of resource B is measured relative to that of resource A. So when we say the productivity factor of resource B is 60%, we're essentially saying if the resource B wants to do the same work that resource A is doing, then resource B will require 40% more time. So if there's something that resource A can do in 1 hour, resource B will require 40% more than that, which is roughly 25 minutes. So instead of 1 hour, it will take resource B 1 hour and 25 minutes to do the work. And that's the reason why now instead of 10 days, we require more than 16 days to get the work done. So again, to summarize, the productivity factor is subjective, and it has to be measured relative to the productivity of another resource. In conclusion, the productivity factor becomes important when we consider the fact that resource B is to be paid for 16.67 days, not to be paid for 10 days. Let's say for a second that the cost of using resource B is $800 per day, and we remember that the cost of resource A is $1,000 per day. So obviously, because resource B has a lower level of productivity, we expect the cost to be lower as well. Because the cost of resource B is $800 a day, the total cost of this activity will be 16.67 days times $800, which is more than $13,000. That's an extra 33% on top of the original estimated cost. So by ignoring the productivity of resource B and the fact that resource B's productivity is lower than that of resource A, the project will end up being over budget by 33% and behind schedule by 67%. As usual, you can head over to management-business.blogspot.com for the script of this short lecture, or look at the integrated cost and schedule control in project management, which was the main resource for this short lecture.